Hello and welcome back to another episode of Leaders in Tech, the podcast that spotlights the insights and experiences of female leaders paving the way for the next generation of women in tech leadership. Joining us today, we have Michelle Garnham, a customer success expert with 18 years of experience in leading and scaling customer success functions at companies like HP, Oracle, before moving into more high growth startups, and now is the founder of Ellacott Consulting. Today, we're going to be speaking about navigating male dominated environments and aligning your career growth with your personal values and aspirations. Michelle has a couple of extra guests with us today, which you might hear barking along, so we'll welcome them as well. Michelle, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Emily. Yes, apologies in advance if there's any barking. Two very noisy sausage dogs. But anyway, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. We're really glad to have you here. To start off, I would love it if you could tell me about a female leader who has given you some sort of inspiration that you've used along the way in your career.
Yeah, so funnily enough, I have a confession to make. I did listen to one of your other podcast guests and I thought, gosh, I hope she doesn't ask me that, because I literally had to sit and think, is there one? Is there actually a female leader? And isn't that awful that I had to take the time to actually sit and think? I mean, don't get me wrong, I've worked with lots of wonderful female leaders, yourself included, back in the day at our time in Infinity. But yeah, sadly, maybe it's a reflection of my age, but most of the leaders around me have been male. I have had some good male leaders. I'm certainly not going to bash the male sex. But at the end of the day, yeah, I would struggle. We did have a mentor program at Oracle, and there was a lady there who set up something called the Oracle Women's League.
Right.
And she was, you know, I respected her for doing that. She was an older lady. She was approaching retirement within that business. So she'd seen a lot over the years at her time at Oracle. So I took a lot of solace from her. And, you know, at that time I was in, as you'll probably hear in this podcast, quite a tough culture. So it was nice to sort of feel that solidarity, that there were women within that business that were pulling together. But yeah, I would really struggle. That's awful, isn't it? I literally sat and thought through every company I've worked in, and a couple of occasions I've had female leaders. I'm afraid they weren't people that I would aspire to be.
Yeah. But that is so interesting because that's the reality of it, I guess. And it's good that you answered that question honestly and didn't just make up some wishy answer that isn't true. So I wanted to start right at the beginning, really. You went to an all-girls school growing up, and then you were part of what we would call probably the first wave of women who were en masse going to university and getting a degree. And I was curious to understand what kind of impact you think those parts of your education had on you in the workplace.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the school I went to was very Victorian. So all about the kind of discipline mentality, which meant when I left school and even going to university, I was very much used to a sort of dictatorial type environment. And on reflection later in life, I look at that, how much that influenced the way I behaved within the corporate environment. Firstly, one of the points I want to make is, you know, being a woman going to university back in the early 1990s, there were lots of lovely women that paved the way before then. But I do think my generation, I've just turned 50, are a wave of women where the burden was quite heavy to continue. So, you know, having gone to a school where I qualified with GCSEs and A levels, it was almost automatic to go off to university. And then once I graduated from university, it was kind of like, you have to use your degree and get a good job and earn lots of money. And I hope that is not necessarily true of younger women today, that they don't feel it's an obligation that because you've been lucky enough to go to university and have an education, that you have to follow that path. And that's not to say I regret my career, But I think I might have made some different choices along the way if I hadn't been so sort of tunnel visioned on, I have to
Yeah.
be successful, I have to climb the ladder.
Sounds like a lot of pressure.
Yeah, but a lot of it, again, it's amazing when you get older, you do a lot of self reflection. And a lot of it was me putting that pressure on. It would have been great. I mean, listening to your podcast, you've got some wonderful women leaders, and one in particular is a mentor. And I look back now, and I'm doing a bit of mentoring as a business owner now. But
Yeah.
I really wish that I'd had that advice. I think that was missing. This is kind of the point I'm making about not having had, an aspiring or someone to aspire to in my career. It would have been great to
Yeah.
have that person to talk to and get that advice when I was young enough to make different
Yeah.
choices.
Yeah, there's a study by Anita Borg Institute, Advancing Women in Technologies, saying effectively that women have less access to mentorship programs compared to men. And I can only imagine that that was even more prevalent when you were starting out your career and most of those people above you were male.
Very few women for most of my career, having been in the tech world, of course. It's always been male dominated. And actually, I was looking at some stats recently, and I think even now in tech, it's like, I think somewhere around 17% of tech companies globally are run by women CEOs. I mean, that is still shocking, isn't it, really?
Yeah, yeah, that's too low.
Yeah.
But it's improving, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
landscape is definitely so much better, and I'm excited for people that are starting out in that world now, because I think there's so many more opportunities, which is great.
Yeah. So then you've mentioned already that early on in your career, there's a lot of, heavy male dominated environments. How do you think women can empower themselves to pursue roles in those male dominated industries, or more importantly, even pursue leadership roles?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Because I think what I can do is reflect on what I would do differently compared to what I did. And my biggest mistake was trying to emulate being a man.
Right.
And genuinely, I think I'm quite a big empath as a person, so I tend to mirror people anyway. And what I noticed over the years was I was matching my managers' styles of management. So after a
Mm.
while, I would take on their sort of characteristics. And I think that's what I've seen. So the women that have been in leadership roles in my career that I've been around, they've done it as well, and so I'm certainly not criticizing them, because I know how easy it is to do that. But it's almost like this feeling that you have to behave in a male way in order to be
Mm.
successful, to fit in within those companies where there's lots of men. And that sadly probably is true historically, that the old criticism of women in the workplace of, you're too emotional, where a man would be, they wouldn't use words like emotional. I've definitely witnessed that over and over again. Whereas for me now, I think embrace your female qualities, because that's what differentiates you. And as a female leader, I think, and I hope my teams over the years would say that my strength as a manager was being female, was being kind, being less kind of dictatorial. I mean, I definitely made that mistake earlier on in my management roles, but I think just be yourself and try not to mirror what you think they want you to be, because I'm a great believer that if you are yourself and it doesn't work out, then you weren't meant to be there. So when you found your place in the work world is when you can be yourself and it's embraced and they like who you are, not that you want to be a chameleon and fit in with other people.
At what point would you say in your career that you maybe noticed that and like began that shift? Because when I think back to when we worked together, I I've probably never told you this. I always just seriously looked up to you you were like that person that was leading in the exact way I wanted to, really empathetic, pro team. And so it must have been before then that you kind of identified these traits or ways of leading that didn't align with what you wanted to be?
Oh, well, firstly, thank you for that, because that's so lovely to hear. That's what everyone wants to be, isn't it? Is, help other people when they're on their journey. So I appreciate you saying that. It's very clear to me when it was. It was when I was at Oracle. So my journey at Oracle was quite odd because I was interviewing with a company that was in the process of being acquired. And then just before the end of the interview process, they said, "Oh, hey, we've just been acquired by Oracle." And I was like, "Oh, no, I really don't want to work for Oracle," because I knew they were massive and I'd heard bad things about the culture. Actually, in the end, it ended up being a really phenomenal period of my career. I was there for just over 4 years, and it was when they were doing all their SaaS acquisitions. And I was in exactly the right place because my boss was very senior in the end. He rose up through the ranks, and through him, he was passing all the new acquisitions into me. So I just got the most amazing opportunity to be in what felt like a kind of startup tech world, but within this massive global enterprise that was Oracle. So I got very excited in the early days of being there, and I was loving it. My team went from like 6 people in the UK to over 50 across Europe, and I learned so much about big companies, like the matrix approach to a business.
Yeah.
I did loads of international travel, was constantly on a plane to America and then latterly all around Europe. And of course, being Oracle, you had these lovely hotels and it was great.
Yeah.
Really, really enjoyed it. And if I'm honest, probably got a bit full of myself at one point, thinking I was the big boss and it was going so well. And I went for a promotion about, I think it must have been about 2.5 years in. And I didn't get it. There were 3 of us shortlisted, where I would be basically the head of the customer success organization for Europe. And the lady that did get it had been at Oracle since she was 18. And
Right.
at the time, my boss kind of explained to me, he said, the main reason she's got it is because she's had her whole career here, so she really understands the business. And that all made a lot of sense to me because I was like, well, I don't know loads of people. I don't know all these names. And in big companies, it is about who you know and building relationships to progress. So I did actually take it on the chin and I was excited to work for a woman. Now, I don't want to be critical of that person because I totally understand her path and how we ended up where we did. But I think that ended up feeling like a knock after a while. And at that point, for the first time ever in my career, I suddenly thought, I don't know whether I want this anymore, actually. And I remember talking to her, we got on fine. I remember saying to her, you need to go for the VP role, you need to move up so that we're respected as a team. And she was kind of like, no, I'm not going to go for that. I don't need that. I don't need the title. But actually, in a business like that, you do need the title because of the fact you're surrounded by white middle-aged men, for want of a better way to describe it.
Yeah.
So, culturally, that was a really tough company to work in. And when I saw her trying to make her progression in that business, I just suddenly started thinking, I don't think I would have enjoyed that role. I don't think I want to climb the ladder anymore. And I'd reached a point in my career where I was earning good money. So my work-life balance was good. I'd progressed beyond being a young person that had loads of debts and the usual sort of, post-university stuff. So money mattered less to me. And the big thing that had mattered was this climbing the ladder and being successful. And I just suddenly thought, what am I after here? What do I want to be? And that's what changed me. And also I had a wonderful team. I mean, I'm still in touch with lots of them. And it really was us against the world, or at least that's what it felt like. And many of them have gone on to be really successful since, which I'm incredibly proud of. And I mean, I think it was just maybe partly age, but also circumstances. But I thought, I don't need to go any further. Actually, I'm good where I am. And that was it. Long answer.
No, but good one. And then I suppose from that point, then when you moved out of Oracle, the companies you were working for were much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, like the startup environment that you'd felt in those early days.
Yeah, loved it. I remember battling to get back in because I started my early career in startups. I loved the cut and thrust of startups and I liked, the fact that you felt more informed and you felt more part of the team versus these larger businesses like the autonomy HPs and the Oracles. You're literally a cog in the machine, and nobody knows who you are, and there's no personal connection. So when I left Oracle, I firstly took a break because I was completely burnt out,
Yeah.
and then I thought really hard about what I wanted next. And for the first time, I thought culture's got to be top of my list. It has to be a company that I love going to work for, that I enjoy the people around me, I respect the people around me, and yeah, that's how I ended up at the lovely Infinity. But I do remember having to convince Paul, the CEO at the time, that I wasn't a big company person, because it's really important that you adapt to the business that you're in. And I mean, as much as I made the argument in the interviews, that I'd been in startups early on, I think I did struggle for the first sort of 6 months to remember that I didn't have all the resources and the swanky hotels and and everything else that goes with these big companies, and make that adjustment. But I absolutely would not go back to that kind of big company environment again, because Infinity and then after that Feature Space, both companies that were 50 to 100 people, and as you will remember, it was just a really great bunch of people. We had struggles like any business, but everyone would go to the pub and all that sort of stuff. I really missed when I'm driving to Reading and nobody goes to the pub because they've all got to drive home, and it's just a whole different world. So not that my whole life revolves around the pub or anything, but
Well, it's interesting actually that you mention about burnout after Oracle, because when I was doing some research in advance of our conversation today, I saw that there was a survey that Deloitte did that said that 40% of women experience burnout at work. And specifically, it's cited that it's due to an imbalance between work and personal life. Do you think that that would have had an impact on like where your burnout came from?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Emily, I'm not married, I don't have children, but I have had lots of women that work for me that are in that situation, and I massively take my hat off to them, because to balance trying to be a mum and a partner at home with a career must be incredibly difficult, because I found it hard enough just being me, going and traveling and supporting a team. So, but burnout is something that I'm quite passionate about, because it's not easy to diagnose, but I've probably experienced it at least twice in my career. But as a manager of people, it was something I was really worried about. And in customer success, it's very common, because the job is all about prioritization and organizing your time. You never finish the working day thinking I've done everything. And that, coupled with the fact that people that go into customer success tend to be a type of person that loves to please, loves to do a great job, loves to be a nice person, because they're relationship builders at the end of the day. Those two things are like a mixing pot of burnout potential. And sadly, I've seen it too many times. And my experience with that as a manager in particular is you can tell somebody they're heading for it, but they very rarely listen to you. And that's awful to watch that happening. But I actually think in some ways, most people need to experience it at least once to understand how to avoid it going forward again. Because it does happen, sadly, and it's very, very common, much more common than people think. And there's a lot of shame around it as well, which I just don't understand. I think it's perfectly natural to overwork yourself without realizing. It's almost like a rite of passage, which is not how it should be. But I think it teaches you then to say, I am not going to do that again. And, I've definitely been in jobs where, like Oracle's a great example, where you're flying, you go out on a Sunday, you don't get back till the Friday night. I do actually think it's partly the reason that I did never, settle down and have a family, which is definitely something I wanted to do, because I just devoted myself to my career, certainly for a good sort of 8 years, if we add autonomy into the equation before that, where there was no room for other people in my life. And I literally just thought my job is everything. And, I definitely don't feel like that now. And I try so hard to help people, male and female, to recognize the importance of life's about love and relationships. It's not about jobs. You know, yes, we need to enjoy our jobs, and yes, it can make you feel great if you're successful, and yes, we all need money to live and have a good life, but really life's about people. It's about, you know, the people you care about. And so often people miss that until later in life. They don't realize that that's where their focus should be.
Yeah. When you're having those conversations with people now and trying, I suppose, to have the conversation that maybe you wish somebody would have had with you
Yeah.
earlier on, how does that conversation go? What kind of things are you, saying to people to help them prioritize what their goals are without feeling pressure of choosing one over the other?
Well, I think, like your other guests talked about mentoring, it's about understanding the person, because actually, maybe for some people it is all about their job and they're really happy to do
Yeah.
that. But I think that's rare. I think ultimately the human being is designed to be around loved ones, and it's nice to have that if you've managed to achieve it. So I think it's not for me to tell someone what to do as a mentor. All I can do is give them permission. I think that's the great thing about mentoring now, is they don't have the fear that you're their boss and that you could somehow report back to the CEO that
Yeah.
they've said something. So I think there's a good level of trust that I build first. And then I think if I'm sensing that somebody is struggling with making that choice, I try to just offer them reassurance. And also, if they feel judged in their company, then that's wrong. You know, every business today, especially post pandemic, should be supporting people to have a good work life balance, because that's the big thing that came out of it, right? Is
Mm.
people suddenly got, I mean, I had two men working with me at Feature Space during the pandemic, and they both had toddler and baby children. And they were just delighted because they got to spend time with their little kids, because they've just spent that time, bath time, and the things that they wanted to do with their kids, commuting to and from an office.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's still true. We don't need a pandemic to tell us, well, we did, apparently.
Yeah.
But, you know, we shouldn't be forgetting the lessons we learned in the pandemic. I think letting your employees value their personal life doesn't mean they're not going to be good at doing the job for you or less productive. I actually believe it makes them more productive and more loyal, which ultimately, you know, saves you replacing people at work, which costs money. So, yeah.
Well, we're actually seeing a lot of companies, pushing the return to the office
It's not.
agenda at the moment. It's definitely, I'm seeing a lot of it. Definitely hybrid working, but some companies asking everybody to go back in 5 days a week.
I
Yeah.
think you need both, right? I really do. And especially since I've been working as a consultant, what I'm hearing over and over again in these companies, and particularly startups where they're trying to build a team, they're trying to build a culture, they've realized there's a lot of learning that goes on by overhearing. So if you imagine when you were sitting at your desk at Infinity and we had everyone around us, you don't realize how much subliminal learning goes in just by listening to someone on the phone doing a great sales pitch or whatever it is. So I do think there's a place for office work, definitely. I think for learning, for collaboration, for just mental health more than anything, because sitting at home on your own all the time is definitely not good for you either. But yes, I mean, you don't want to be going in 5 days a week, because we all know, certainly if you live in London, it takes you an hour or so to get in. It's stressful, you're sweaty and hot and angry by the time you arrive. You know, in my case, driving to Reigate every day, it doesn't make sense. But I think, yeah, any business that's saying you've got to be in 5 days a week needs to look at themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 hours door to door for me to get to the office, so that would be, what, 20 hours a week just commuting? That's crazy when you think about it, but yeah, I do think hybrid's good, especially in specific environments. The kind of team I run is usually people who need to be around others because the job itself is quite lonely, cold calling people all day and don't have anyone around you for that
Yeah.
camaraderie, so I think there's value to that.
I think being in an office is important for innovation as well. So in the tech world, you know, getting everybody in a room together and going through stuff and ideas and discussing, you know, I know we're all used to video conferencing now, so it's different to back in the day. But yeah, you can't replace face to face, I think.
No, you can't. You can't. One thing that I'd love to speak about, women are less likely in the workplace to have a sponsor. advocating for them for their promotion. That's come out of a McKinsey report, which I'll put in the show notes. Did you have sponsors in your career, and how important were they towards your career growth?
Are you talking about where somebody's actively trying to help you progress?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have had some great bosses for that. I don't know what went on behind closed doors, but I certainly have experienced promotions throughout my career. But as a manager, I think one of my greatest joys was always forwarding on an email from a customer that was praising one of my team to the CEO
Mhm.
or to someone senior. And I think that's absolutely something we should all do as leaders, is that if they feel like they're not getting the exposure to senior people in the company, that's a great way you can do that for them, is to say, look how brilliant Bob is because his customer loves him. But yeah, I think sponsorship by your boss is critical, because without it, people might not even know who you are. I mean, hopefully in a smaller company they will know who you are, but certainly in the likes of Oracle and Autonomy, you have to have somebody paving the way for you a little bit in those companies.
Yeah, yeah. In a open plan environment with 40 or 50 people, you've got to hope that you are known there. But yeah, definitely in the bigger companies, it's that concept of visibility. You can be
Yeah.
doing great work, but if people don't know that that work was done by you, or that project was championed by you, or that customer's happy with something that you did, then I suppose the value is not attributed to
No,
you.
definitely. I completely agree. And I also, it's really important that people advocate for themselves as well. So if you want a promotion, don't wait to be sponsored or wait for your boss to say, oh, great news, I've decided to promote you. Ask for it. Go and have the conversations about career development. A good manager should be sitting down with you, once a quarter and saying, how are we progressing on that personal development plan that we put together last year?
Mm,
You said you wanted to move into a people management role. How can I support you to get to the skill levels that we want? In return to that, you as the employee need to be bringing that information to your boss and building a
yeah.
business case for your promotion. As a manager, there's nothing more frustrating than somebody who thinks they get a promotion because they've been there longer, or they found out that somebody else is paid more than them, or whatever
Mm,
it is. It's like, get there on merit. If you accepted that salary when you started, then it's irrelevant what your peers are being paid, unless, of course, you're female and your male peer is paid double, which has happened to me. But yeah, I think people often ask for promotion for all the wrong reasons, and
yeah.
you've got to think of it as a business case. That's my advice.
That may also go back to your earlier point about what are your goals, and are you just working from the perspective of I'm feeling this pressure that's either been put on me by society or been put on me by myself or my early childhood? Am I just working from a place of there's an expectation that I need to progress for the sake of progressing, and not does this actually align with what I want for my life?
Yeah. And that's where your annual appraisal should be, right? Is, what do you want? That's the first question I'll ask anyone in a new team, is, what do you want from your career? What do you want to achieve in this business? But what's the long-term picture? Like, where do you want to go with this? And women in particular, I actually ask them, I say, do you want to have a family? Because you need to think about that, because it does factor in. That was my mistake. And I'm happy to share that with people and say, think about that, because it's not a no-no. It doesn't mean your life stops when you have a family. But think
Yeah.
about where you want to get to before that event, or what sort of maternity package the company has, all those
Mhm.
kind of things. But yeah, be genuine to yourself. Think about what you really want. I think that's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. When you speak about having wanted to go down that family route, that being something that you always wanted, but it didn't happen,
Mm.
do you think that it didn't happen because you were too busy flying internationally, being an international businesswoman, right? To take the time to set the foundations? Was it kind of a time thing, or was there anything else
Mm.
involved?
I mean, I'm a great believer. If your mindset is right, then you would meet somebody regardless of how busy you are and everything else. So, on reflection, there's definitely an element of, I don't think I was thinking in the right way, and I don't think I was open in the right way to invite
Right.
that into my life. And I think to a degree, still sitting here single at 50, that's still going on. I was laughing actually with a friend at the weekend and saying that part of the reason I'm so cynical, and I am totally cynical, I laughed and joked and said, the trouble is I've worked with men for too long. And I genuinely have been one of the lads for 25 years. And the awful thing is, you really get inside the male psyche when that happens. And you start thinking, oh my God, are they really like that? And I'm not suggesting that all men are like the men I've worked with, but or had those conversations with. But I think it made me very cynical about trust and whether or not people were going to be the person that I wanted to have in my life. So yeah, I think it's on you. It's not on the company, or being too busy, because you could meet somebody sat on an aeroplane flying to America, right, if you were looking. But I was probably like head down in the laptop.
When did it kind of did you realize, oh, I didn't do that part of life?
Yeah, I would say late 30s is when it started to dawn on me. Being female, obviously, you've got your biological clock ticking. I had, again, my generation have had children later. I've got a lot of friends that had their families in their late 30s, some of them in their early 40s. And I was sort of thinking, oh, I've still got time. And then, it was more like the children thing was, oh, actually, I'm running out of time now. I think it is what it is. And, I still haven't given up. I'm actually currently looking at potentially fostering, or, if I was lucky enough to meet somebody, adopting. So, you can still have that. But if I don't have that, it doesn't mean my life's not fulfilled. It just means I learned a valuable lesson.
Yeah. And actually, what an amazing thing to be able to do, kind of take someone in who's not got the support structure that they need to have a good life for themselves. So yeah, that's good. So I only have one more question, and we actually ask this question to everybody who comes on. You've listened to another one, so you know what's coming. Based on the starting question, I'm hoping that you actually got an answer for this one. Let's see. What is the best piece of advice that you've received from a leader in tech?
Yeah. Well, I think the best piece of advice is don't be afraid to hire people who are better than you. Again, if you're feeling threatened, if you don't feel secure as a leader, you can often think you need to be the best on the team in order to sort of stay in the role. Whereas actually the opposite is true. Hire people that are better than you, and then your job is a lot easier. So yeah, don't be afraid to hire top talent, because that's what makes an amazing team.
Yeah, I love that, because I think a lot of people get nervous and scared about bringing someone in who is potentially better than them and might upstage them, but that's an ego thing. If we put the ego aside and surround ourselves with high performers, then at the end of the day, you're going to have a high performing team that is successful, and that's what good leadership actually is.
Yeah. Exactly. And like I said earlier, I'm really proud of the fact that at least 2 of my team members at Oracle have gone on to be very successful, much more senior than I am or have been.
Yeah.
And that's a great feeling. That's a really good feeling.
I've just started, I guess, to see that, because I'm 7 years into leadership now, and a few of the people who I've promoted are really rising up the ranks. One of them's a VP of sales, so it's great to see them kind of going up and up and up and up. Yeah, especially when I've had that conversation with them at the beginning of their career, literally the beginning of their career, when you're coming into an SDR role, and they say, "This is what I want to do. This is where I want to go," and then I can see they're going there.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's really
it's a great feeling. Yeah,
great feeling.
I've got a little sausage dog coming to say hello.
Oh yeah, that's good. Oh,
just
hi.
So you know that he does exist. This is Brian. Yeah. He's very small.
He's very cute. So thank you so much for joining us today. I think we've covered a lot of really good things. Being in that corporate environment, what that kind of did for your way of leading in your early career, and then moving into more of a high growth tech startup team. And I really liked the insights that you shared on finding that balance between your kind of personal life and your career growth, and making sure that you're aware when you're kind of going towards burnout, maybe going through it once to get a real feeling of why you shouldn't be doing it again. But yeah, definitely some great tips there. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us and speak about them.
Thank you, Emily. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Leaders in Tech. Your support means the world to us, and we're incredibly grateful for the opportunity to share these empowering stories with you. If you're listening on a podcast platform and you believe in our mission to amplify the voices of women in tech, please take a moment to leave us a rating. It really helps us grow and reach more listeners. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with others. Anyone watching on YouTube, engagement makes a big difference, so please subscribe to our channels and give this episode a like and share. If you resonated with any of the topics today or have some similar experiences, then we want to hear from you in the comments section. Let's keep the conversation going. Your contribution is not just a favour, it's a powerful step towards change. Remember, every story shared and every voice heard can ignite a spark in someone's career. So, if you know an amazing woman with a story that needs to be heard, please nominate them. Thanks again for listening and for being part of this journey.